I think we have to consider that probability as fairly high at this point. That's why I said, quit, stop. That's the answer. The answer is to stop fighting immediately. Pick some third country somewhere to hold negotiations. I would stop supplying Ukraine. I mean, they've already lost between 1.5 and 1.8 million Ukrainian soldiers killed in action. Add to that another million plus that have been wounded. These are the real figures, not the phony figures that NATO publishes or we publish or Canada publishes. Forget it. Those are the real losses. The population of Ukraine is being cut by 50%. They've left the country or they've died or been killed. So you've got what, 20 million, 21 million maybe left out of a nation of over 40 million at the beginning. This doesn't make sense. When this sort of thing happens, you stop. You recognize you can't go on or you're going to lose everything.
The headlines focus on missiles and military operations. But what if the real story is what happens after the fighting? Rising oil prices, fragile supply chains, mounting debt, and the risk of a much wider conflict could have consequences far beyond the battlefield. In this interview, retired U.S. Army Colonel Douglas MacGregor shares his perspective on where current events could be heading, why he believes the stakes are much higher than many realize, and what it could mean for the global economy. Let's hear his analysis.
Well, a friend of mine said it was kind of a moment of sobriety from an alcoholic that had decided this. And I think that's what it turns out to be. I'm not sure any of it was ever really serious. If you go back to that memorandum of understanding, that was effectively an agreement that gave the Iranians virtually everything they wanted. I wouldn't call it a surrender document. I would simply say what they fought the war for is what they get. We, on the other hand, were not necessarily going to profit in any particular way. In other words, we saw no strategic gain from it. At least Donald Trump didn't. And, he's one of these people that keeps talking about you've got to open the strait, open the strait, open the strait. He fails to point out that the strait was open until we attacked Iran. So, let's get the strait open, Donald. I agree with you, and let's not worry so much about the rest of the stuff. But unfortunately, he's not a free agent. So let me give you some points that I think your listening audience will appreciate. Point number one is the Iranians do not trust Donald Trump. They have no confidence in anything he says, no confidence in the stability of his decisions. That's very important. Secondly, international investors. We're talking about people that are in the business of financing things like refineries, oil infrastructure, mining, and so forth. They have no confidence in Trump's ability to reestablish stability in the region. They see the Middle East as a place where they will not invest or, lend money until they're absolutely certain that there will be no more war. So when he talks about, well, we're going to have this agreement and it's going to be so good and we're going to win, and after we win, everything's going to be better, nobody believes that. So you're not going to see any oil or gas infrastructure rebuilt until, I would argue, the United States and Donald Trump are effectively marginalized or completely out of it. Trump represents instability right now. Investors and leaders believe Trump will ensure endless destruction from endless wars, and that means, if you're in finance and business, endless losses for financiers and investors. Now, the situation today is much worse than it was when he signed the Memorandum of Understanding. The continuation of the war as he's waging it right now, which is escalating, Daryl, is going to lead to oil price increases, something which he's been able to suppress by manipulating the markets and Wall Street. So I think in a couple of months, we're looking at $150 a barrel, and it could go much higher. This means that we're also looking at a massive global downturn, which the United States, given its incredible debt, may not recover from for 20 years. So I think those, from your standpoint, from people in Vancouver, from people in Canada who invest and want to know where is the market going to go and what's going to happen, what will or won't work, I think those are pretty grim points, but I think they're the truth.
MacGregor begins by arguing that today's conflict could extend far beyond one region. His concern isn't only about military action, but the wider economic consequences if instability continues. In his view, prolonged conflict could reshape investment, energy markets, and global growth in ways many people still underestimate.
He started the war and said, we've got to affect regime change. We got to get rid of this regime. We got to have to have a new government that will work with us. Okay. That failed. And people said, well, if that failed, what are you going to do? Well, we can't let Iran have a nuclear weapon. Okay. So what are you going to do? Well, we're going to bomb. Well, how's that gone? Well, that hasn't worked. Well, what are you going to do now? Well, I'm going to destroy Iran. Remember the statement, civilization gone in a night. I mean, only a complete lunatic.
It's like praise be to Allah and some other stuff. Yeah.
Only a complete lunatic would make such a statement. And now where are we? Well, suddenly it's all about the Gulf. Got to reopen the Gulf, reopen the Gulf, reopen the Gulf. Okay, how's that going? Well, it's not going very well. You sign this MOU and you say they broke the MOU. In reality, they didn't do anything they said they wouldn't. They were going to control the Gulf and they were going to tell people where they had to move. We tried to circumvent that and move them through a different corridor. That provoked the Iranians. But I think the real goal was to get the war started again, because the real goal at this point is to destroy Iran. Now, what do I mean by destroy? You want to so completely weaken the government, the central government, and the society that Iran breaks up into smaller fragments or pieces. This has always been the Western goal in Ukraine against Russia. You know, nobody cares about Ukraine. Ukrainians are people we just use like tissue on the battlefield. They're the cannon fodder. And we keep providing them with whatever we think that we can get them that creates the illusion they're still alive out there. And they managed to do some serious damage. They reduced the refining capacity, at least temporarily, by about 38% through some of their unmanned strikes. Hasn't changed the war, doesn't make any difference on the battlefield, but you know, it creates the illusion of something in the hopes that more people will throw money away on the war with Russia. So that war has failed. Well, the same goals are now in effect with Iran. So you had to get the war started. We found a way to do it. We blamed them for breaking the MOU. You have to remember, in the United States, you have, I would say, at least 25 to 30% of the population is willing to believe anything you say that is bad about not just Iran, but Islam in general and Muslims in general. So that's helpful to the administration. But the people who are really behind all of this are people who support what we call the Israel lobby. And the most prominent members are these Zionist Jewish billionaires, some group of them, several of them, enormous quantities of money with which, over the years, they have been able to purchase the United States government for use. Now, what about the rest of the population that doesn't fall into that almost 30% that I mentioned? Well, they don't want anything to do with the war in the Gulf. They're opposed to it. And I think if you look at the polling data, that comes through. The last time I looked, it was something like 73% of Americans questioned said we should be out of the Gulf. Well, more than that opposed World War I. Didn't make any difference. We were still dragged into the war. Right now, simply because most Americans don't think we should be involved in the Gulf, doesn't make any difference. Why not? Because the people paying for everything are the billionaires that support the Israel lobby. And the Israel lobby wants one thing: the destruction, dismemberment of Iran, because they're in the business of establishing the supremacy and hegemony of the Jewish state over everyone and everything in the region. They are linked to enormously powerful financial interests that want to take over the resources, just as they wanted to take over the resources that are now sitting under Russian control in eastern Ukraine. They want to take over the resources, the oil fields and so forth, that Iran possesses. They've effectively humbled the Arabs and beaten them down to the point where the Arabs will do almost anything they tell them to do. So the last man standing in the region at the moment is Iran, and Iran will not submit to Israeli demands. Now, there's another major player that could be just as challenging, if not even more so, than Iran, and that's the Turks, or Turkey. The Turks are an immensely powerful state, but their leader has chosen to straddle the fence in an effort to benefit in terms of territorial expansion and financial strength from all sides. How long will that go on is anybody's guess. I suspect at some point that will end and they will turn on the Israelis. But right now, Iran is staying the course. It's maintaining its sovereignty, its independence against us and Israel. And we are really muscle for the Israeli program. You remember all these mafia movies? They'd say, well, come on, Tony, we know you're not really muscle. You're not one of the muscle guys, so talk to us, okay? We're the muscle.